Most people in Generation X carry a number in their mind, a milestone, a specific year they once promised themselves. By then, I will finally be able to retire. And they protect that number. They build plans around it, sacrifice for it, year after year. The problem is not that the plan is wrong. The problem is that it was built for a world that no longer works the same way anymore. The job market changes at a terrifying speed. The body cannot endure pressure the way previous generations once did, and time keeps moving forward no matter what the spreadsheet says. Generation X grew up being taught that delay was a virtue. Work hard, stay patient, and the reward will come later. We learned that not through words but through the way our parents lived every day, waking up early, coming home late, never complaining, just continuing on. But nobody told us that patience can become a trap if the thing you are waiting for may no longer be there by the time you finally arrive. Saving money matters, preparation matters, but there is a bigger question being ignored beneath all of those calculations. Is your plan serving your life, or are you serving the plan? Below are 7 reasons why many people in Generation X should consider retiring earlier than they think. Not because their finances are already perfect, but because sometimes waiting until everything becomes perfect is the most expensive mistake of all. Reason 1. You have already paid with things that can never be bought back. There is a kind of cost that never appears on a financial spreadsheet. Not money, time, the weekend evenings spent checking emails, the vacations where your mind never truly left the office, the family dinners cut short because of another deadline. We spent time as if it could always be earned back, but nobody refunds your 40s. Nobody gives you back the summers you lost. The problem is not that we were lazy or lacked discipline. The opposite is true. Generation X became a generation that normalized overworking on a systematic level and even took pride in it. We called exhaustion dedication. We called neglecting ourselves being responsible. But if you look back honestly, you paid a heavy price with the best years of your life, with your health, with your presence, with moments that will never return again. So the real question is not whether you can afford to retire early. The real question is whether you can afford to keep paying that kind of price. Retiring earlier is not giving up. It is reclaiming what was always supposed to belong to you, while there is still enough time left to truly enjoy it. Reason 2. Your identity has become trapped inside your job title. Try a small experiment. Someone asks you, "Who are you?" What is the very first answer that appears in your mind? For most people in Generation X, it comes almost automatically their position, company, or profession. We spent 30 years building our identity around what we do, to the point that many of us forgot who we are when we are no longer doing it. This is a problem people talk about far less than money, but in reality, it may be even more frightening. When work ends, whether by choice or by force, many people do not fall into crisis because life becomes empty. They fall into crisis because they were never given the chance to discover what life outside of work was supposed to look like. And that is the trap of waiting too long. You reach the age of 67 with enough money, but no idea what you actually want outside of work. No idea what you truly enjoy. No idea who you are without meetings, without performance metrics, without someone waiting for your report. Retiring earlier while you still have energy and curiosity gives you time to rediscover that answer, not in a state of crisis, but in a state of intentional calm. Who are you beyond your work? The earlier you begin searching for that answer, the richer that answer becomes, and the deeper your life afterward may become in ways you never expected. Reason 3. The job market is changing faster than you can adapt. There is something many people already know, but very few want to say out loud. Artificial intelligence and automation are not only replacing entry-level jobs, they are restructuring the very middle layer of the workforce, exactly where many people in Generation X currently stand. Middle management positions, analysis roles, coordination work, information processing, the very careers many of us spent decades mastering. And unlike previous economic shifts, this one moves at a completely different speed. It does not give you 5 years to adapt. Sometimes it barely gives you 18 months. That does not mean you will lose your job tomorrow, but it does mean the certainty you are relying on while planning all the way to the age of 67 may be far more fragile than you realize. 25 years of experience is no longer the untouchable shield it once was. Loyalty to a company guarantees very little when balance sheets need to be restructured. We have all watched this happen to other people and quietly thought, that is different from me. But none of them believed they would be next either until they became the next one. Choosing to step away on your own terms, while you are still in a position of strength, while you still have leverage to decide the conditions of your exit, that is not giving up. That is recognizing the situation before the situation begins making decisions for you. And for Generation X, that may be one of the smartest decisions still left to make in time. Reason 4. The most important relationships in your life are waiting to be invested in. Ask almost anyone near the end of their life what they regret the most. Almost nobody says, I wish I had worked a few more years. They talk about people, about time, about conversations that never happened, trips that were never taken, loved ones they never spent enough time beside. That is not a coincidence. It is a pattern repeated often enough to become an uncomfortable truth. Generation X became the generation of independence, self-reliance, and never wanting to burden anyone else. We became very good at working. We became less skilled at being present, truly present, not simply sitting in the same room while the mind remains somewhere else, not nodding through dinner while still holding a phone in one hand. And while we continue optimizing financial spreadsheets, the time we have with the people who matter most quietly becomes smaller and smaller. Parents grow older faster than we realize. Close friends slowly drift into separate lives. Children grow up and stop needing us the way they once did. Money can compound over time. Relationships do not work that way. Some doors only remain open for a certain period of life, and then they close. Not because you lacked money, but because the moment itself passed, and there is no number inside a bank account capable of buying back what has already closed forever. Reason 5. The best version of you is not waiting at the age of 67. We grew up with the idea that retirement was a reward reserved for people who worked enough, endured enough, and waited long enough. It sounds fair, but hidden inside that idea is a dangerous assumption that the best version of yourself, the most curious version, the freest version, the most alive version, is standing still somewhere on the other side of that doorway, patiently waiting for you. Reality is often the opposite. The people who find the deepest fulfillment after retirement are usually not the people who waited the longest. They are the people who began building that version of themselves much earlier, while they still had enough energy to explore, enough flexibility to make mistakes, and enough adaptability to grow into new experiences. They entered the next stage of life not with an empty sense of identity, but with a foundation already being built little by little over time. Nobody suddenly becomes a completely different person overnight at the age of 67. You become that person gradually, through years of living more intentionally, trying things you never had time to try before, paying attention to things you once ignored, slowly rediscovering the parts of yourself buried beneath deadlines and responsibilities. Every year you allow yourself to begin earlier is another year you are allowed to become more fully yourself. And in the end, that may be the most valuable investment you will ever make, measured not in money, but in the one thing you can never create more of once it runs out. Reason 6. Real wealth is not found in the final number. We were taught to think about financial freedom as a destination, a specific number, a specific day, and once we finally reach it, that is when life truly begins. But there is a paradox very few people talk about. The people who chase that number all the way to the end, the most disciplined people, the most patient people, the people who never drift away from the plan, sometimes become the people who struggle the most to stop, not because they do not have enough money, but because after decades of accumulation, gathering more has become a habit instead of a tool, and eventually, they no longer remember what they were accumulating everything for in the first place. Generation X understands better than almost anyone what it means to work hard for a goal. But many of us were never trained in another skill, the ability to recognize when something is finally enough. Not enough in the sense of giving up, but enough in the sense that what you already have today may already be capable of creating a good life, if you finally allow it to do so. Real wealth is not the largest number you can possibly reach. It is the distance between what you have and what you truly need, and freedom exists inside that distance. The real question is not, when will it finally be enough? The real question is, enough for what? And once you answer that question honestly, you may realize the number inside your head is smaller than you once believed, and the day you are able to begin living the way you truly want may be much closer than your original plan ever imagined. Reason 7. You are modeling something for the next generation. There is something most people rarely think about when calculating retirement. Not money, not health, but the message we are sending simply through the way we live, day after day, in front of the people watching us. Your children are watching, not listening, watching. They notice what time you come home. They notice what you look like on Sunday night when Monday is approaching. They notice the way you talk about work, whether it sounds like a source of meaning or a burden you carry until you can no longer carry it anymore. And even if you never say a single word, they are still learning. Generation X learned the lesson of sacrifice from our parents in exactly the same way, not through speeches, but through observation. We watched them work themselves into exhaustion and call it responsibility. Then we grew up and repeated the same pattern because it was the only model we ever knew. But you can become the person who breaks that pattern. When you consciously choose to step away from the endless cycle before burnout destroys you, you are not only protecting yourself, you are showing the next generation that another way of living is possible, that success does not have to be measured by how many years you were able to endure suffering, that knowing when to stop can also be a form of wisdom rather than weakness, and that may become the most meaningful legacy you ever leave behind. Not the money inside a bank account, but a different understanding of life itself passed down not through words, but through the way you choose to live the years you still have left. None of us were ever taught how to end things intentionally. We were taught how to begin, how to keep trying, how to continue when life becomes difficult. But the moment when you look at the life you are living and quietly ask yourself, is this truly what I want? Nobody ever prepared us for that moment. So we continue. We continue waiting. We continue telling ourselves that the right time will eventually arrive when the number becomes larger, when everything feels more secure, when life finally feels just a little safer. But the right moment rarely knocks on the door by itself. The 7 reasons in this video are not reasons for you to abandon everything tomorrow. They are not a call for impulsive action. They are simply reminders of a truth many of us have known for a long time, but often forget inside the noise of daily life. Time is the only thing you spend that you can never earn back again. Money can be lost and earned again. Opportunities can close and reopen. But the years that disappear never return, no matter how many zeros exist inside your bank account. The real question was never, can I afford to retire early? The real question is, can I afford to keep postponing my life? And only you can answer that. Not a spreadsheet, not a number, not a plan you created many years ago when life looked completely different from the way it does now. At some point, enough is enough. The only question is whether you will recognize that before time quietly makes the decision for you.